I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do. Well, it's a tremendous sense of responsibility, actually. And it's also a humbling experience because I am actually trying to do the right thing, and sometimes what I do has an unintended negative consequence, as it did in Russia.
In Russia, he pledged $100 million to help scientists who might otherwise have sold their expertise to bidders like Iran or Iraq. In Eastern Europe, he's educated a new generation. And in Ukraine, he spent millions retraining the old Soviet military.
I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do.
Then we have Forbidden Stories. It has been proven to receive funds from the US State Department. And guess who do they feature as a supporter on their website? The Open Society Foundation. Here's something else that you must know. Sherpa, a French NGO, which is a persistent litigator in India's Rafale deal with France, has also been a recipient of indirect funds from the OSF through a third party. Simply put, a revolving door spins between these NGOs and the offices of George Soros. The same goes for media organizations involved in this project. The Media Research Center, an American media watchdog established in 1987, says 30 American news organizations have links to George Soros, and most of them were part of the Pegasus project. The project itself is under investigation in many countries. At some point, India too will have to specify its position on surveillance and clear the air on whether it uses softwares like Pegasus. In the meantime, can this nexus between news organizations and George Soros be ignored? Can these links be dismissed as a baseless conspiracy theory? I don't think so. A billionaire is using his power, influence, and yes, his money to make media networks shape narratives across countries and to go after establishments that don't match his vision of the world. Is Hungary, the birthplace of George Soros, the only European country that snoops on its citizens? It was the only one out of 44 European countries to feature in the Pegasus list. Where are Britain and Germany? Where is the United States, the biggest snooper of them all? Are we to believe no one is spied on in these countries? That said, Pegasus is just one piece of this puzzle. The Western media, in cahoots with organizations like Open Society, have had a long habit of cancelling the so-called third world countries, countries like India in particular. They see India as a metaphor for intolerance, orthodoxy, ignorance, poverty. Let me show you a few examples of this cancel culture. August 2019, when India revoked Article 370 in Kashmir, the New York Times said, bloodshed is all but certain.
For both the Russian middle class and for Soros, who lost his $2 billion. Whatever his motivations, no one can accuse him of greed. He's backed away from the day-to-day operation of his businesses and is giving away his billions now with the same determination that he made them in places like Haiti, a country that has less money in the bank than he does. Last month, he brought the First Lady with him for a look at some of the projects his foundation is funding.
This is Mr. George Soros, and he's going to be helping the hospital.
This year, Soros plans to give away almost $500 million around the world. In Bosnia, when the water supply to Sarajevo was cut off at the height of the siege, it was Soros who wrote a check to jury-rig a pipeline through an abandoned highway tunnel.
$5 million up front can be more valuable than $50 million a year or two later.
Ambassador Richard Holbrooke brokered the peace in Bosnia.
At one point, after the Dayton peace agreements in Bosnia in 1995, for a considerable period of time, George had given more money to implement the peace agreements than the U.S. government had. He just could move that fast.
At the center of George Soros, there's an inherent contradiction.
Which is?
Which is, on one hand, you're the capitalist who does not care about the social consequences of his act, and on the other hand, you are a philanthropist who cares only about social consequences. How do you resolve the two?
Recognizing that as a competitor, I've got to compete to win. As a human being, I am concerned about the society in which I live.
Which George Soros am I talking to now? The amoral George Soros or the moral George Soros?
It's one person. It's one person who at one time engages in amoral activities and at the rest of the time tries to be moral.
To understand the complexities and contradictions in his personality, you have to go back to the very beginning, to Budapest, where George Soros was born 68 years ago to parents who were wealthy, well-educated, and Jewish. When the Nazis occupied Budapest in 1944, George Soros' father was a successful lawyer. He lived on an island in the Danube and liked to commute to work in a rowboat. But knowing there were problems ahead for the Jews, he decided to split his family up. He bought them forged papers, and he bribed a government official to take 14-year-old George Soros in and swear that he was his Christian godson. But survival carried a heavy price tag. While hundreds of thousands of Hungarian Jews were being shipped off to the death camps, George Soros accompanied his phony godfather on his appointed rounds, confiscating property from the Jews. These are pictures from 1944 of what happened to George Soros' friends and neighbors.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian.
Right.
And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right. Yes.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was... well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away. So I had no role in taking away that property. So I had no sense of guilt.
Are you religious?
No.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Soros told us he believes God was created by man, not the other way around.
You probably have quite a few opinions about what's going on in the news cycle right now. But it's important to remember one thing. You're wrong. Here's why.
It's called brainwashing.
You now have all the truths.
What I'm trying to say is Ted Kaczynski was right.
Why is that?
Because we find it more convenient to operate without it.
So in some ways it's to escape regulation.
Yeah, that's right.
George Soros, in a way, is Donald Trump without the humility.
One of your money manager told us that George really does think he's a god.
I mean, if you think that you're God and you go into financial markets, you're bound to come out broke. So the fact that I'm not broke shows that I don't believe that I'm God. I am basically there to make money. I cannot and do not look at the social consequences of what I do.
This man is a carnivore of the first order.
Like risking $2 billion in Russia. When the Russian market began falling apart in August, Soros was the country's single largest investor. He called the U.S. Treasury and asked Uncle Sam for $7 billion to prop up the ruble. When U.S. officials failed to intervene, Soros wrote a letter to the Financial Times of London saying he thought the Russian currency should be devalued by as much as 25%. A few words from Soros were enough to cause panic selling that fueled the crash.
What's it like to have a statement that you make have such serious, grievous consequences? I mean, you can, it looks to me like in a number of situations you can take a position against a currency or make a statement, and the whole country falls apart.
Well, it's a tremendous sense of responsibility, actually. And it's also a humbling experience because I am actually trying to do the right thing, and sometimes what I do has an unintended negative consequence, as it did in Russia.
Social credit deducted.
You now have all the truths. The real truth.
Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength.
What I'm trying to say is Ted Kaczynski was right.
Now, why anyone in their right mind would think it's a good idea to give the very elitists who destroyed the planet more power to now save the planet is beyond me, but hey, we're talking about the same species who eats Tide Pods and thinks polyester can protect you from a virus.
Are we really right?
The entire world is losing its mind. It does feel like something is ending, like we're awakening from a dream. And in that sense, for a while,
we really did have everything, didn't we?
To start, you're completely missing the point, and everything you think is actually at odds with reality when you look at the data.
And boy has it ruffled some feathers to dive into a complex societal issue.